it's a bit like gridlock in the US system, where the President and the Congress and the Senate don't agree about stuff, then nothing can get done.
I don't know how you manage it, Martin, but gridlock is exactly what we're going to talk about now, which is the buses. We've got a protest on College Green tomorrow, starting mid-morning anyway, Gary. I know you've actually been quite a big campaigner on buses, haven't you?
Absolutely, and I will be there tomorrow.
What's gone wrong?
Well, basically, you go back about 30 years to the bus privatisation, but the problem locally here is that eventually the previous government actually agreed to a buses bill where power can be given to local metro mayors to actually franchise buses, as they do in London, which is what we actually need, but neither the Bristol mayor nor the metro mayor, Tim Bowles, are interested in franchising. They can't understand it. They don't know why it's necessary. And unless they take those powers, we're going to be at the behest of a private monopoly, which is a disgrace.
Now, the actual, on the ground there, it's been a situation where there's been quite a lot of problems with the app people use to... I mean, we keep hearing about how amazing it is, all this smart ticketing and all this kind of thing, and buzzwords like that. But actually, it's no good when the app doesn't even open, or you can't buy a ticket on the app, or the phone runs out of power just as you're about to get on the bus. But it's also, isn't it, a lack of drivers?
Well, lack of drivers, lack of organisation, but the problem comes back to a private monopoly that completely dominate things, squeeze up the fares. I just could not believe the stupidity of the mayor the other week when First put through a 33% increase in their fares, and he actually welcomed it as a move towards equality. I mean, it's just absolutely staggering.
Well, why? Hang on, because there was the idea is to have a flat fare, isn't it? So that people who are doing short journeys pay the same as people doing long journeys. Yeah. That actually benefits a lot of people on the outskirts of the city.
None at all.
No?
No, because people on the outskirts of the city didn't buy two £2.50 tickets as they tried to maintain to go into town and out of town. They bought a £4 day ticket. And they still buy a £4 day ticket, but unfortunately, that's gone up as well, unless you buy it in advance online.
OK, so the flat fare is only for the short journeys, and First Bus know that that's going to be almost all those journeys are going to be done in the central area, which are going to be the short, the less expensive tickets. So actually, this is really a fare increase, and actually applauded by the mayor. As if it's something good.
Exactly, 33% increase. Fares went from £1.50 to £2, and it's not just right in the centre. My own ward, Knoll, has some very severe areas of deprivation. Great area, but it has some very severely disadvantaged people, and they're having to pay a 33% increase in bus fares.
So do you think that Marvin gets bungs from First Bus? It sounds like he's doing their PR for them, basically spinning to try and make it sound as if what they're doing is good.
Well, unfortunately, I can't understand what his motivation is, but basically it's a staggering disgrace. And when I asked him questions about this last time in council, there was this sort of slow dawning on his face that he was suddenly realising that he'd been supporting a big fare increase.
Was that before or after he did his marvellous speech about it all?
Well, which one was this?
Well, this is the State of the City speech where he was talking about
after
it.
That, yeah. It's after.
Anyway, look, one of those things that it's interesting that there's a bit of unanimity around the City Council, not with the Mayor, but with other people in the Labour group, and one of them is Mark Bradshaw. He used to be the Transport Portfolio, I think, going back to the days of Mayor Ferguson as well, and possibly
before that in the Labour administration.
Yeah, so Mark has seen through a lot of the things like the Metro bus, which hasn't made a lot of difference, but I mean it's a thankless task.
Actually, it has made.
You think so? Go on, tell us that.
Well, the First Bus had to admit they've got twice as many passengers as they projected for on the first route coming in from North Bristol. It's actually, it should have been a roaring success. The previous mayor messed it up. He overspent, redirected a route, caused years of delays. If he hadn't been meddling away 3 years ago, it would have been functioning and producing really good results. It seems like
transport in Bristol is a bit like Brexit, but people don't really seem to stay there for very long. They get sort of elbowed out by the mayor.
Well, I mean, it's not just
Or
transport.
they resign. They resign. Sorry, I shouldn't say that, should I?
It isn't just transport, is it? I mean, it's been a merry-go-round. You look at his original cabinet, and how many is left? About 2 or something out of that lot?
Any thoughts on why Vari Threlfall's resigned?
I think there's quite a large section of the Labour Party who want to distance themselves as much as possible from the Mayor.
Well, let's have a listen now to, I suppose, he's not quite voiceless, Mark Bradshaw, but he's someone I think who would be one of the people who would be at least being listened to by the bus protesters, and because he's got at least a few thoughts about why we're in this situation and what the situation, or what we should be doing to sort it out.
I think 1985, the Conservatives took away all the controls over local bus services outside London. So it's essentially a commercial free-for-all. So if you've got an operator's licence and the consent of the traffic commissioner, who's a civil servant, you can run a bus service. I could buy buses or lease buses, and as long as my drivers were properly accredited and my service was properly accredited, I could run a bus service between Bedminster and Temple Meads or Bedminster and Parkway, and it's a free-for-all. And First have a monopoly over the Bristol market. They have had for some time. In other parts of the country, it's other operators. The only way you really tackle that over time is give authorities outside London the same powers that they have in London, where TfL can franchise and does franchise all local buses.
I mean, if Tim Bowles was to get really tough, what could he do?
Well, he could start a franchise process on some of the key routes. So he could actually put out to tender a service specification for, say, services up the Gloucester Road or up Park Street or into South Bristol. And he could specify the type of vehicle, the frequency of the vehicle, the maximum fares, which we've done for Metrobus, actually. We did that for Metrobus because we used different powers to be able to do that. He could do that, put it out into the market and see what the price is. Of course, there is a cost involved with this, but you have control because if they don't perform, you can get rid of them over time. And this has happened in London, where different operators have come and gone because they haven't lived up to service standards. It's interesting, when I was talking to colleagues in TfL, given the whole network that they run across London and into suburban London, TfL doesn't own one bus. It's all provided by a range of private operators, probably 10 of them, all working to a common standard, common delivery, common fares, timetable and route map. Can be done. There is a cost involved. I think it would send a message to bus operators in Bristol that actually, unless they got their act together, there could be a whole new situation here. Of course, Bristol's a relatively small market, but if you extend it across Greater Bristol, you're talking well about 1.1, 1.2 million. It's quite extensive then. And these franchising powers do exist in the City deal, in the legislation that enabled the City deal. And I think all it would take is one to get it started and perhaps achieve some real change over time.
Well, there's some real solutions there being talked about by Mark Bradshaw, who used to be on the Cabinet before Vari Threlfall, who was recently resigned from the Cabinet on transport, Gary. Look, I mean, really what he's saying there is it's Tim Bowles is simply just not pulling his finger out, and we're not hearing. I mean, actually, Marvin himself has taken over the transport portfolio, but we're not hearing this from him.
No, absolutely not. I'm very glad that Mark's finally come round to our point on franchising.
Well, hang on, because you did do a joint letter with him, didn't you?
We did over the last few months, and that was regarding the management structure in the City Council, which has downgraded transport. But what I'm saying is, some years ago, Labour Party and Tory Party campaigned against us when we said that franchising was the way forward. It was more difficult to do, to be fair, some years ago, but it's absolutely the answer, and we're very glad that Mark's on board. Possibly that's something to do with Marie's leaving as well, that she realises that's what's got to be done, and it is absolutely necessary. And I hope that our petition that young Max is actually putting about for us to take control, actually it will get to a large enough number and will be debated in council, because we want to pin all those people who say we don't want franchising, including the mayor, and get them to explain themselves.
Yeah, that would be nice, wouldn't it? Also, just to let you know, First West of England, I did invite them on this programme, and someone called Rob Pym, who I'm not quite sure what his job title is, but their press office was said, well, he may be able to come, but then we were told, no, he won't. So they sent me a press statement instead, most of which is actually waffle, including a load of stuff about Metrobus, which isn't really relevant to the protest tomorrow. They say, we understand and sympathise with Ms Langland's frustrations and those of other bus passengers who've been affected by delays in recent weeks. Everyone wants to get to work. Well, we know that, First Bus. This is rather patronising, actually. Our top priority are our customers. We work hard every day to provide a reliable, effective service. There's absolutely no advantage to us in running poor services.
Well, customers are not their priority, and they've said regularly and on a number of occasions, we are not a public service, we are a private profit-making company. And they are. You can't blame them for that. That's what they try to do, maximise the profit. So they see their job as squeezing the maximum amount of money out of the customers rather than increasing the number of people on public transport.
And I'll carry on with their press statement. We're missing out the bit about Metrobus, but indeed they say, many of the challenges we've been experiencing in recent months are a product of the success of bus services in Bristol and the west of England. We've seen a 10% year-on-year increase. That's actually 46% over the last 4 years, which is the fastest rate of growth anywhere in Britain.
It has been growing from a very low rate. We're still only about half what other core cities actually have in terms of percentage of people who use buses. But they did improve dramatically, and they started off improving when the Greater Bristol bus network were put in, when the new bus lanes, etc. That started the process. And actually, Metrobus will make a significant difference as well. But it was almost killed off by the previous mayor. He made such a hash of it. But you must have coordinated approach. And I'm glad that Mark's now with us in terms of franchising, because that's the only way you can do it.
And they finish up by saying, we are urgently discussing with Bristol City Council and the West of England Combined Authority, that's the Metro Mayor, who are responsible for investing in infrastructure to support the smooth and efficient running of the public transport system. Priorities for addressing the heightening congestion issues across Bristol and the neighbouring areas. Tackling delays and hold-ups on the road network is the best way of delivering a more reliable and punctual bus service. So they're saying that really there's loads more demands on the infrastructure, so this is, I'm afraid, you're just going to have to shrug your shoulders and cope with it.
Absolutely not. When the Greater Bristol bus network was introduced, it resulted in an increase in bus passenger use, significant, particularly for commuters, because it was the main routes coming into town. And the next stage after that should have been to have the franchising for the buses. What's actually happened was First trousered all the profit from those improved position on congestion. They weren't held up so much. They could move the buses quicker, trousered all that profit, but any other route, they said, we're not going to run it unless you give us a subsidy. And that's what we get with the present system, and that's what's got to stop.
Martin, we've had a strange situation, haven't we, with the Metrobus coming in, where the circle around the edge of Bristol has been widened out into the sort of Tory shires, and as a result, we've got a Conservative Metro Mayor, even though actually what the main job of Tim Bowles is, where the congestion, of course, is in the city centre, which would have voted Labour. So it almost looks as if this is a deliberate attempt to have somebody who's not really representing people of Bristol deciding what's going to happen with Bristol's buses.
Well, I come back to what I said. I'm not really in favour of elected mayors of Bristol. I'm not in favour of Metro mayors either. This is all a dog's breakfast. There ought to be national transport planning. That's what we used to have. National coaches were run by the government nationally, and local authorities like South Yorkshire used to run the buses, and it worked pretty well. And then we decided to throw all that out the window. We've had 30 years of nonsense. And of course, I agree with franchising. That's the best option that we've got it looks like. But actually, it should all be run by the public sector on a not-for-profit basis.
It's all happening at midday. I'm sure you'll be down there at College Green tomorrow, Gary. And there's also the petition, of course, which means that there'll be some sort of debate about this at the City Council.
We sincerely hope so. We need everybody to be signing that petition and to get their friends to sign that petition because it needs 3,500 signatures.
Doesn't Marvin want to talk about this at the City Council?
Well,
I mean, he could just surely say, well, we want to debate about this. No?
Well, he could do, but he doesn't want to debate about it, does he? Because he's in an awkward position, having set himself against this and not being able to reach any kind of agreement with the Metro Mayor. In fact, the progress that was made on public transport in Bristol was actually, the planning was some years ago that actually led to the increases, and we've had nothing progressing over the last few years. No new plans. And they came in before the Metro Mayor. They came in on cooperation between the 4 local authorities in partnership. They produced the Greater Bristol Bus Network. They got the money from central government to run to build the Metro Bus. It was the Mayor in Bristol who almost killed that and messed it up.
Well, if you can't go on a bus, maybe you can go on a train. The only trouble is we want more carriages, say passengers, crammed into packed Bristol commuter trains. It's not legal to ram cattle into transport at the levels of crowding that GWR is pushing humans into, one commuter said. That's in the Bristol Post. We've also got another story. People really don't like the hard seats on the posh new train serving the South West Main Line. Now, this is the line from Bristol to London, Gary, and I mean, I've been on these trains over the last month or so. They've got some wonderful new trains, but they've actually got horrible, uncomfortable hard seats. It's almost like you've got to squeeze yourself in to the seats as they're in line because they've packed a load more extra seats in and you can hardly move once you've got in there. And also the trains themselves, well, they seem to be almost like a kind of sports car where you're sitting at a station 1 second and the next minute your cup of coffee's flying towards you and the train is shooting off in the other direction. They also brake really sharply as well. So it altogether a bit of a dog's breakfast from the first group, isn't it?
Well, unlike you, I can't afford to travel on those trains to London. And don't particularly want to either.
I think you'll probably find that the coach, OK, it takes an extra hour or so maybe, but you'll get more space and a more comfortable seat.
The last time I went to London, I did go on the coach, as it happens. Because it was massively cheaper and it went to where I wanted to go to.
Martin, the other thing, of course, here is, I mean, this is a story from a couple of months ago. British rail passengers spend X times more on train fares than their European counterparts. Would you like to guess what X is? So if you're in Europe and you want to go from A to B on a train a certain amount of miles, how much more are we spending in the UK? This is a little quiz for you.
We're just guessing, are we?
Yeah.
What about 30%?
It's actually
3 times.
Six times more we're spending over here. Martin, what is going on? It's like some sort of racketeers have taken over our transport.
Well, when John Major privatised the railways in the last gasp of that Tory government, it was said that it was going to be the poll tax on wheels. And basically it was an absolutely stupid idea. An infrastructure like this, nobody in Sweden, for example, or Switzerland would regard this as at all appropriate to be run in the private sector for private profit. But in Britain, we believed in turning the infrastructure into private monopolies for private profit, which actually, of course, then directs investment away from small, medium enterprises and into this, rent seeking in the infrastructure. But of course, in the long run, the stupid stuff we did in that era should have been reversed. It hasn't been reversed, and we've even got to the stage now where we can't reverse it, so we're stuck with it. And that's the second, third rate situation we have in this country, where we've made loads of stupid mistakes, and not only have we made stupid mistakes, we don't even learn from those stupid mistakes. It's just ridiculous.
33 miles it is from Luton to London. Now the trouble is it's actually quite expensive to do that trip. In Britain it's £387 a month. if you were living 33 miles outside Paris or Rome, it's going to be £61 a month. Gary, why are we paying so much more here? Isn't it just because we need to go to work and somebody somewhere is saying, right, well, you're going to pay way over the odds?
Well, partly on the continent, there's state subsidy to keep the cost down. And in this country, the cost is actually met by the individual passenger rather than by the state. That's why there's a difference.
OK, so just to remind folks, it's midday tomorrow. College Green is the Bristol bus process. Now let's get on to Brexit. There's been quite a lot happening in that this week. And let's go to the House of Commons, where